Michael Turner stared at the computer screen, blinking rapidly to make sure he hadn't misread it. There it was, his numbers, every single one of them, perfectly matching the winning combination for the state lottery. $18 million. Not 1,000, not a couple 100,000. 18 million. The air felt thicker around him. He pushed his chair back slowly, stood up, and walked to the window of his home office, pressing a hand against the glass. Outside, the sun dipped low over the Seattle skyline, washing the streets in a soft amber hue. Cars moved below like tiny models, people walking their dogs or heading to dinner, unaware that one of their neighbors had just become a millionaire many times over. He didn't jump. He didn't scream. He didn't laugh. Instead, Michael sat back down, leaned forward with his elbows on the desk, and exhaled long and slow. The absurdity of it all, this ticket, a last-minute buy on a whim while picking up milk, now worth more than his entire projected lifetime earnings. His heart pounded, but his mind was eerily calm. Amanda didn't know. The kids were upstairs, probably on their tablets. No one had a clue, and for now, he was going to keep it that way. Most people, he imagined, would call their spouse first, maybe their parents, definitely their best friend. But Michael's hand hovered over his phone without dialing. Instead, he opened a new spreadsheet, the kind he used daily in his job as a data analyst, and began listing names: Amanda, Jordan, Mom, Dad, a few close friends, some co-workers. Beside each name, he wrote one simple question. If they thought I had nothing, would they still care about me the same? Michael had always been cautious with trust. He wasn't paranoid, just observant. Over the years, he'd seen subtle shifts in how people treated him depending on what he could offer. Promotions brought sudden interest from extended family. A bonus one year had friends suggesting expensive group vacations. It wasn't malicious, but it was enough to keep him wondering. Now, with $18 million sitting quietly in his digital wallet, he saw a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity not just to change his life, but to truly understand it. He locked the ticket in his fireproof safe, tucked behind tax documents and old passports. Then he made himself a cup of coffee, sat on the back porch, and stared at the garden Amanda had planted in the spring. Life looked exactly the same, but it wasn't. Not anymore. The next morning, he went to work like nothing had happened. He answered emails, attended meetings, nodded through presentations. During lunch, his co-worker Dave joked about retirement and asked what Michael would do if he won the lottery. Michael chuckled and replied, "Probably vanish and not tell a soul." Everyone laughed. He laughed too. No one had the faintest clue he wasn't joking. That night, after dinner, Michael washed the dishes while Amanda scrolled through her phone at the kitchen island. Their daughter Ellie worked on a drawing at the dining table. Their son Max played video games in the living room. Everything was normal, but inside, Michael's mind raced. He watched Amanda's expression as she scrolled, wondering what she would say if he told her. Would she be happy, relieved, excited, or would she see dollar signs instead of him? He decided against telling her. Not yet. Over the next week, he researched everything: how to claim the money anonymously, which financial advisors were trustworthy, how to avoid sudden tax disasters. He opened new accounts, created backups, encrypted files. Every step he took was quiet, calculated. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. The thought of suddenly having wealth was overwhelming, not because of the money itself, but because of what it might reveal. Michael didn't want to live in suspicion. He wanted to know, truly know, who loved him for him, who would offer their hand if he was drowning, not knowing he had a lifeboat hidden nearby. And so the plan formed. He wouldn't spend a cent. Not yet. No upgrades, no shopping sprees, no new car in the driveway. He'd pretend everything was normal. In fact, he'd go a step further. He would create the illusion that he had lost everything. Michael drafted a resignation email, but didn't send it. Instead, he worked out the details of a lie he'd start spreading slowly. A fake layoff, a sudden job loss. He'd watch, listen, observe, and then decide. That night, lying in bed beside Amanda, he stared at the ceiling. The room was dark, filled only with the soft hum of the heater. He thought of the coming weeks, how this secret would grow heavy, how people might change before his eyes. He was nervous, yes, but also oddly at peace. This was the only way, he thought, to find the truth buried under years of assumptions and half-truths. Money changes people, but losing it, or pretending to, reveals them. And Michael Turner was ready to find out who would still stand beside him when he had nothing. He closed his eyes, letting sleep take him, knowing that tomorrow he'd begin the most honest experiment of his life, with a lie. Michael stepped into the kitchen early that morning, the aroma of fresh coffee already filling the space. Amanda stood at the sink, rinsing a plate with her usual mechanical grace. She glanced at him briefly, her tone flat as she said, "Morning." He nodded, kissed the top of her head, and poured himself a mug. There was a quiet tension in the air, not unusual, but always present, like a soft in the background of their lives. He sat down at the kitchen island and opened his laptop. He stared at the blank screen, rehearsing the first sentence of the story he was about to spin. By mid-morning, he had crafted the narrative. He told Amanda he had a video call with corporate, and an hour later returned to the living room, pretending to be shaken. "They're downsizing," he said, voice low. "I've been let go." Amanda froze, her phone still in her hand. "Wait, what?" Just like that. "They're restructuring the whole division," he added, eyes carefully avoiding hers. "No warning. They gave me 2 weeks severance, that's it." Amanda's response was swift. She rushed over and hugged him tightly, a reflex more than a choice. "We'll figure out. Maybe it's for the best. You hated that job anyway." Michael gave a small nod, grateful for the initial support. But he knew this was only the beginning. The first day was always the easiest, when shock disguised itself as compassion. It was in the days that followed that truths began to bleed through. That evening, Amanda called her mother. Michael could hear the tone through the walls, concern edged with subtle alarm. "Yes, I'm serious." "Laid off?" "No. I don't know what we're going to do yet." "Yeah, he's okay. I guess." When Amanda hung up, she didn't return to Michael. She stayed in the bedroom, scrolling through job listings on her phone, her fingers moving fast. Michael stood silently in the hallway, listening to the faint taps of her screen. Every movement a quiet calculation of the life she had imagined and how it was beginning to unravel. The next morning, Michael sat with Ellie while she ate her cereal. "So you're going to be home more now?" she asked, spoon hovering midair. "Yeah, for a while," he replied with a soft smile. "But that just means more time with you and Max." "Cool," she said simply, taking a bite. Her innocence was disarming. He leaned in and kissed the top of her head. Of all the people who would learn about his fake downfall, he already knew Ellie's response would hurt the least, because she loved without conditions. Later that week, Michael visited his parents. They lived 30 minutes outside the city in a modest 2-story home that smelled of old wood and lemon-scented cleaner. His mother, a sharp woman with a habit of turning concern into critique, listened to his lie with arms crossed. "Well, maybe if you had taken that project lead role last year, instead of being so picky," she said after a long pause. "You have a family to think about, Michael." "I know," he replied, keeping his voice even. His father, ever the quiet one, sat in his recliner flipping through a newspaper, occasionally glancing over but saying little. It wasn't disappointment Michael saw in their eyes. It was judgment dressed as advice. He left an hour later with a container of leftover lasagna and a heavy chest. The next to find out was his brother, Jordan. They met at a dive bar they used frequent in their 20s, the kind of place that never bothered updating its jukebox or cleaning its sticky floors. Jordan showed up 10 minutes late, as always, wearing a hoodie and the same smug confidence he'd carried since high school. "Man, that sucks," Jordan said, shaking his head. "I mean, I figured you'd hit a wall in that office job eventually, but damn, no warning at all." "None," Michael said, sipping his water. Jordan leaned back, cracking his knuckles. "You know, this could be a blessing. I've been working on this new thing, some crypto investment thing my buddy's doing. Might be worth looking into now that you're free." Michael arched a brow. "Crypto?" "Yeah, like passive income stuff. You front a little cash, and it multiplies over time. Real potential man. Michael kept his expression neutral. I don't think now's the right time. Jordan's tone shifted just slightly. I mean, I'm not saying you need to go big. Just something to keep you floating, you know? You don't want to burn through savings sitting on your hands. I don't have much savings, Michael lied smoothly. Not after the house. School tuition, bills. Jordan didn't hide his disappointment. Well, guess we'll both be hustling for a while. He flagged the bartender and ordered another drink. Conversation moving on, interest visibly waning now that there was no money to chase. By the weekend, Michael noticed a quiet transformation in Amanda. She stopped asking how he was doing. Her smiles felt more forced. She spent more time texting, often shielding her phone screen when he walked by. She had always been pragmatic, but now she moved with frantic energy, as though the very ground beneath her feet had shifted and she needed to find new footing, fast. On Sunday, during a quiet moment in the living room, she looked up from her laptop and said, "Maybe you should call your old boss. See if there's any freelance work you could pick up. We can't wait around hoping something falls into your lap." "I've already reached out," he lied again. "No one's biting right now." She didn't respond, just closed the laptop and stood up. "I'm going to my mom's for a bit. She needs help with some stuff." Michael nodded. She didn't ask if he wanted to come along. By the time Monday rolled around, Michael had a list of names he had told the same story. Co-workers reached out with lukewarm sympathy. A few asked vague questions about his next steps, none offering real help. His inbox, once filled with casual group chats and team jokes, had gone silent. The distance between him and the people he once considered close was becoming a chasm. He began documenting everything, not in anger, but in clarity. A digital journal where he logged every interaction, tone of voice, body language, choice of words. He didn't need them to grovel or save him. He just wanted to see who would stay, who would listen, and who would vanish the second he was no longer useful. The deception weighed on him at night. He would lie in bed and hear Amanda breathing beside him, wondering if she was already imagining life without him. Some evenings, he caught her looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite place. Not fear, not hatred, but something colder. Indifference. He thought about ending the ruse, telling her everything, watching her face twist in confusion and disbelief. But it wasn't time yet. He hadn't seen what he needed to see. He hadn't tested the limits of this illusion, not fully. And so, Michael pressed on with the lie. Every day, he played the part of a man who had lost everything, while quietly holding on to more than anyone around him could imagine. The following week unfolded like a slow, steady unraveling. Michael watched as a narrative he had planned began to take deeper root within his circle. With each passing day, new reactions emerged, some subtle, others brutally clear. He didn't push anyone for support, didn't hint at needing help. He simply allowed the silence to stretch, and in doing so, revealed more than words ever could. He received a call from his sister-in-law, Lisa, on a Thursday afternoon. She rarely reached out directly, usually filtering communication through Amanda. Her voice was sweet at first, overly sympathetic. "We heard what happened, Mike. I just want to check in. See how you guys are holding up." Michael leaned back in his chair, gazing at the raindrops threading down the window. "We're hanging in. Things are tight, but we're managing." There was a pause, too long to be casual. Then she said, "Jordan told me you're keeping the kids in that private school. I mean, that's got to be expensive, right?" Michael resisted the urge to respond defensively. "Yeah, it is. I just wonder," she continued, her tone carefully curated, "if it might be time to reevaluate some things. Public school's not the worst thing. Plenty of kids turn out fine." "I'll take that into consideration," Michael replied flatly. She changed the subject quickly after that. But the message had landed. It wasn't concern. It was a gentle prod, cloaked in judgment. Not about what was best for the kids, but what was inconvenient for everyone else to witness. That evening, Amanda mentioned it, too. "I got a call from Lisa. She's worried we're being impractical." Michael looked up from his notes. "Do you think we are?" Amanda hesitated, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. "I think maybe we need to start being realistic." Max is young enough to adjust. Ellie will complain, but she'll adapt. I don't want a Michael, but we can't act like nothing's changed. He nodded, keeping his expression unreadable. If it comes to that, we'll handle it. What struck him wasn't suggestion itself, but the timing. Barely 2 weeks had passed, and already the willingness to shift their children's entire educational environment had surfaced. Not out of financial necessity, but quiet panic to maintain their image of control. At dinner that weekend, they visited Amanda's parents. It was meant to be a casual family meal, but the undercurrent was anything but relaxed. Her mother, Helen, handed Michael a glass of water with a concerned smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We've been thinking," she said, as they settled into the dining room. "Maybe Amanda could pick up some work again, just part-time until you get back on your feet." Amanda didn't protest. In fact, she nodded quickly, too quickly. "I've already been looking. I applied for 2 positions yesterday." Michael glanced at her, surprised. "You didn't mention that." "I didn't want to stress you out," she said without meeting his gaze. Helen smiled, pleased. "It's important to stay ahead of these things. Can't let months pass with no action. Otherwise, it's hard to recover." No one asked Michael how he was coping. No one asked what he needed. The focus was entirely on adjustments, reactions, contingency plans. Michael felt invisible, reduced to a mistake that needed fixing. After dinner, as they drove home, Amanda was unusually quiet. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. Finally, she said, "My mom's not wrong. I can't just sit here and wait. I need to do something." Michael didn't argue. "If that's what you feel is right." "I do." The following day, Michael bumped into an old co-worker, Rachel, at a neighborhood coffee shop. She hadn't heard the news yet. Her reaction, once he told her, was a cocktail of surprise and discomfort. "Oh, wow. That's awful. I mean, I always thought you were one of the most reliable guys on the team." He forced a smile. "Things change, I guess." "Well, keep your head up. Something else will come around. Just maybe start small, right? Contract work, gig stuff. There's no shame in that." He thanked her, finished his coffee, and left. But the word stayed. There was always an undertone, a subtle shift in tone the moment they believed he had fallen. He could almost see them recalibrating their perception of him in real time. One night, after the kids were in bed, Amanda came downstairs holding a stack of envelopes. "Bills," she said simply. "We need to talk." Michael nodded and sat down at the table. Amanda laid out the numbers with precision: mortgage, utilities, school fees, groceries, car payments. "We've got maybe 2 months before we have to dip into what's left of savings." "Understood," Michael said. "We need to sell the Jeep," she added, "and probably cancel the vacation we booked last year. I know we haven't paid the final deposit yet, but it's not realistic anymore." He nodded again. "That makes sense." She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in days. "You're taking this really well." Michael met her gaze evenly. "Panicking won't fix anything." Amanda hesitated. "But if you're not worried, it makes me feel like you don't care." "I care," he said, his voice firm. "I care about keeping us stable. I care about staying calm for the kids." She didn't reply. Instead, she gathered the papers and left the room. That night, Michael opened his laptop and added several new entries to his journal. He noted Lisa's comments, Helen's suggestion, Amanda's job search, and the new tone in her voice when she spoke to him. The shift was happening rapidly, and no one seemed to notice how they were changing. His brother Jordan messaged him again the next morning, this time with a screenshot of a luxury car he was thinking of flipping if he could get some quick capital. The message ended with a casual, "Any chance you can front me $5,000? I'll pay it back in a month, tops." Michael stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "Wish I could. Things are really tight right now." The response came quickly. "Damn. All right. No follow-up. No concern. No offer to help him instead. Just silence." That weekend, he ran into a neighbor, Tom, while bringing in the trash bins. Tom offered a friendly nod, then said, "Heard you got laid off. Man, that's rough. You thinking of selling the house?" Michael blinked. "No." "Why?" Well, property taxes are no joke, especially in this market. If I were you, I'd cash out while the neighborhood's still hot. Just a thought. Michael thanked him and went inside. The suggestion wasn't entirely illogical, but it wasn't helpful either. It was another instance of people seeing a problem and wanting it removed. Not solved, not supported, just gone. By the end of the week, Michael had a list of more than 20 observations. Some were subtle, others glaring. But the pattern was unmistakable. Most people didn't ask how he was doing. They asked what he was going to do for them, or how he was going to minimize the inconvenience his situation posed. He wasn't angry. Not yet, but the weight of it pressed against him. The lie was doing its job, peeling back the layers, revealing what hid beneath, and what he saw wasn't pretty. Michael began to notice a change in Amanda, not through grand gestures, but through the absence of small ones. Her goodnight kisses grew shorter. Her phone rarely left her hand. Her tone, one soft even in disagreement, took on an edge sharp enough to draw blood. She wasn't cruel, not yet, but she had grown colder, the warmth in her voice replaced by something clinical, distant. One morning, while Ellie and Max sat at the kitchen table eating breakfast, Amanda stood at the sink washing dishes with a stiffness in her shoulders. Michael approached her quietly, placing a hand on her back. She flinched just slightly, before masking it with a quick smile. "You okay?" he asked. "Fine," she replied, "just tired." "From what?" he asked gently. "You haven't been working yet." She turned off the water and faced him, drying her hand with a towel. Tired of worrying. Tired of trying to pretend we're not one mistake away from falling apart. Michael wanted to tell her the truth right then. That everything they feared was a shadow, not a monster. That the future wasn't uncertain at all. But he couldn't. Not yet. The experiment wasn't complete. Instead, he said, "We'll get through it. Together." Amanda didn't respond. She turned back to the sink. Later that afternoon, Michael overheard her on the phone with her sister. "No, I don't think he has a plan. He says he's looking. But I haven't seen him send out a single application. I don't know, Claire. Maybe he's just frozen or something. Like, mentally checked out." It wasn't just what she said. It was the tone. Exasperated, almost embarrassed. As if his misfortune were something she needed to distance herself from, before it bled into her own identity. That weekend, Amanda suggested they have a serious talk, after the kids went to bed. Michael agreed, knowing this moment had been building for days. She sat across from him at the dining table, arms folded, eyes fixed. "I've been doing the math," she began. "If we sell the Jeep, cut Max's martial arts classes, and switch Ellie to public school next semester, we can maybe stretch things until January." Michael nodded. "Okay, but we can't live like this indefinitely. I need to know what your plan is. Not vague promises, actual steps." "I've been thinking about contract work," he lied. "Maybe building up a few consulting gigs while I look for something permanent." Amanda frowned. "You've been thinking about it?" "Michael, it's been 3 weeks. Thinking isn't enough. You have a family." "I know that." "Do you?" she asked, voice rising. "Because right now it feels like you've given up. You don't talk about next steps. You don't ask me how I'm doing. You're just here." He swallowed, keeping his expression calm. "I'm trying to keep everything from falling apart." Her laugh was sharp. "By doing nothing? That's not holding things together. That's watching them collapse." Michael didn't argue. There was no point. She had already built a narrative in her mind. He was drifting, ineffective, passive. And the longer he let the lie live, the deeper it drove a wedge between them. Over the next few days, Amanda began pulling away even more. She spent evenings out with friends, returning later than usual, sometimes after midnight. When Michael asked where she had been, she answered with a shrug and a vague, "Just out. I needed space." He didn't press. Instead, he observed. She had stopped wearing her wedding ring. Her phone now had a password she hadn't used before. And once, when he walked into the room, she was in the middle of quickly closing a text thread. Even Max and Ellie seemed to notice the shift. "Is Mom mad at you?" Max asked one night as Michael tucked him in. Michael smoothed the blanket over his son's small frame. "No, buddy, she's just stressed." Ellie, ever more perceptive, waited until following morning when Amanda left for errands. She sat beside Michael on the porch steps, legs crossed, watching the sky turn from blue to gray. "Are you guys fighting?" Michael sighed. "Not really fighting. Just figuring things out. Is it because of the job?" He turned to look at her, the wind brushing strands of her hair across her face. "Why do you ask?" "Because she's different. She talks less, and when she does, it's always about money. Like, that's the only thing that matters now." Michael didn't answer. He didn't have to. Ellie leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "I still like when you're home more." It took all his strength not to break in that moment. The honesty of children had a way of shattering the strongest masks. That evening, Amanda cooked dinner. Without a word, they ate in near silence, the clinking of utensils the only sound in the room. When dinner ended, Amanda stood and said she had a quick thing to do. She didn't elaborate. Michael cleared the plates alone, while Ellie helped Max with homework. Hours passed. Amanda didn't come home. Michael sat on the couch, staring at the front door. Midnight turned to 1. 1 turned to 2. He sent a single message, "Everything okay?" and got no reply. She returned just before dawn. Her eyes were tired, her makeup faintly smeared. "Where were you?" he asked. "I needed air," she replied. Then she went upstairs without waiting for a response. The next day, Amanda booked a hotel for a personal reset weekend. She claimed she needed time to think. "About everything," she added, without looking at him. Michael nodded. "Take whatever time you need." As she packed, he watched from the doorway. She moved quickly, efficiently, like someone already half gone. When she left, she didn't hug the kids. She just said she'd be back Sunday night. That weekend, the house felt colder, not just in temperature, but in spirit. Michael took the kids to the park, made pancakes, helped Ellie build a puzzle, and played video games with Max. He tried to smile, to act normal, but inside, he felt the quiet ache of a bond loosening at the seams. When Amanda returned, she was calm, too calm, detached. "I've decided to apply for a full-time job," she said. "I need to be practical." Michael nodded. "Okay. And I'm going to stay with my mom during the week. It's closer to the office. Less driving." He stared at her. "Are you moving out?" "It's not permanent. Just space. For now." Michael didn't protest. He didn't ask questions. He simply watched as the woman who once promised to weather every storm with him now walked out, not because of real hardship, but because of the illusion of it. He closed the door behind her, then sat alone in the living room. The silence was deafening. But in that moment, he realized something more painful than anger or betrayal. Amanda wasn't just disappointed in him. She had already started imagining life without him. Sunday morning arrived gray and damp, the kind of Pacific Northwest drizzle that clung to the skin and made everything feel heavier than it was. Michael stood at the kitchen window, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching raindrops gather and slide down the glass. Amanda hadn't returned the previous night as promised. No call, no message, just more silence. The kids had gone to bed asking when she'd be home. Michael hadn't lied. He'd simply said soon and hoped that would be enough. By 9 o'clock, Max was watching cartoons in the living room, sprawled out across the couch with a blanket tucked under his chin. Ellie, however, had quietly slipped outside. Michael noticed the absence only when he saw the front door slightly ajar. He set his mug down and followed. Out on the front lawn, beneath a makeshift tent fashioned from 2 patio chairs and a bedsheet, Ellie sat cross-legged beside a small table. Her plastic cash register sat open, and an assortment of old toys was neatly arranged for display. Handwritten signs, each taped to a stick planted in the grass, read "For sale" and "Help Daddy." Michael stood at the edge of the porch, frozen. She looked up and smiled. "Morning, Dad. I open early in case people walk by on their way to church." He walked toward her slowly, his heart caught somewhere between pride and heartbreak. "What's all this, Elle?" She held up a stuffed giraffe. I'm selling my toys. I figure if I can raise enough money, you won't have to worry anymore. Michael crouched down, rain soaking into the knees of his jeans. Where did you get this idea? I heard you and Mom talking about money, she said without a trace of shame. I know things are hard, but I have stuff. I don't need all of it. I can help. Her logic was childlike in its simplicity, yet piercing in its sincerity. He picked up a plastic robot, missing one arm, and set it gently back down. You don't have to do this, Elle. It's not your job. But it's my family, she replied, and I don't want to move or go to a different school or see you sad. Michael blinked rapidly, the tightness in his chest making it hard to breathe. He reached out and pulled her into a hug, his voice shaky. You're the best part of all of this, you know that? She nodded into his shoulder. I just want things to be okay again. He held her longer than necessary, needing the moment more than he had realized. When they finally pulled apart, Ellie looked back at her table and whispered, I think people would pay $5 for the robot. It still makes sounds. Michael smiled, forced and fleeting. Tell you what, let's keep it for now, just in case Max wants to play with it later. She nodded in agreement, but only after carefully placing a hold sign beside the robot. For the rest of the day, Michael stayed close to her, watching his neighbors pass by with curious glances. A few stopped to ask what she was doing. Ellie explained with cheerful honesty, My dad lost his job and I'm helping. Some handed her small bills out of sympathy. Others praised her generosity. One couple dropped off a box of cookies for the brave little entrepreneur. By late afternoon, Ellie had collected just over $37 in a plastic container. She counted it carefully, then gave it to Michael with both hands. It's for you. Michael took it, placed it on the kitchen counter, and stared at it long after Ellie had gone to watch a movie with Max $37. It was barely a dent in a single grocery trip, but to her it was everything. A gesture untainted by ego, free of expectation, pure. That night, as he tucked her into bed, Ellie looked up and asked, Did I help? He smiled. More than you'll ever know. She nodded once, satisfied, then curled beneath her blanket and drifted off to sleep. Michael stood in the doorway for a long time afterward, staring at her sleeping form, the soft rise and fall of her chest. He thought about Amanda, about the coldness that had taken root in her. He thought about Jordan, about Lisa, about Helen. He thought about every glance, every whispered comment, every conversation that had revealed more than it intended. And he thought about Ellie, sitting in the rain, selling her treasures because no one else had bothered to ask how they could help. The next morning, Amanda finally returned. She walked in as if she still lived there, but belonged somewhere else. Her eyes were puffy, her face pale. Michael didn't ask where she had been. She didn't offer. I'm only staying tonight, she said as she set down her overnight bag. I've got an interview tomorrow. It's near Mom's, so I'll head back after. Michael nodded. Ellie had a toy sale yesterday, out on the lawn. Amanda blinked. What? She sold her toys to help with bills. Amanda looked genuinely stunned. She did what? Michael said nothing more. He watched her face change, confusion, guilt, maybe shame. But she didn't apologize. She didn't ask how much Ellie had raised. She just sighed and walked upstairs. Later that evening, while Amanda helped Max with his backpack, Michael pulled Ellie aside and asked, Do you want to use the $37 for something special? A treat? Maybe new art supplies? She shook her head. It's for us. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. I'll save it then, in a special place, just for us. That night, after the kids were in bed, Amanda emerged from the bedroom holding a pillow and blanket. I'll sleep on the couch. It's easier. Michael didn't protest. He simply turned off the light and went upstairs alone. He stood by Ellie's door one more time, listening to the soft rhythm of her sleep. And for the first time since this entire charade began, Michael felt a quiet flicker of peace. Amid the deception, amid the unraveling of relationships, there remained one constant, a child's love unshaken by status or circumstance. It was the only thing he hadn't doubted. And in a world where everyone else seemed to shift with the wind, that made all the difference. Michael hadn't heard from Jordan in nearly a week, which in itself wasn't unusual. His brother had always drifted in and out of his life with the same inconsistency he brought to everything: relationships, jobs, and obligations. But on Wednesday evening, the silence broke with a sudden message. "Can we talk? Got something big I want to run by you." Michael didn't respond right away. He was helping Max with a model rocket project in the garage, their laughter filling the small space with warmth that had grown rare lately. When Max went inside for a snack, Michael wiped his hands on a rag and finally replied, "Sure, come by tomorrow, after 7. The next evening, Jordan arrived wearing a leather jacket despite the warm air, his grin wide, his energy manic. He barely stepped through the door before launching into his pitch. "Okay, listen, this is going to sound crazy, but I've got a legit opportunity. Real money. I just need a bit of help getting it started." Michael offered him a seat at the dining table. He poured 2 glasses of water, keeping his expression neutral. "What kind of opportunity?" Jordan leaned in, his voice dropping like they were planning a heist. "So, my buddy from Phoenix, he's been flipping exotic cars. Like, buying cheap at auctions, doing minimal work, reselling for double. Legal, fast turnover, no overhead." Michael folded his hands. "And you want in?" "Already in," Jordan said, "but I'm short on cash to lock down this McLaren. It's undervalued, man. Like, criminally. I need $5,000 to close the deal by Saturday." Michael raised an eyebrow. "$5,000? Yeah, just 5. You'll get it back in a month. 2 tops. I'll even give you a cut, 10%. No risk." Michael sipped his water. "What happened to that crypto thing you mentioned last time?" Jordan waved the question away. "That scene's dried up. Scammers everywhere. This is real, tangible, fast cash. And you came to me," Michael said slowly, "after hearing I was unemployed." Jordan hesitated, just for a second, then he shrugged. "You're my brother. I figured if anyone would help, it'd be you." Michael tilted his head. "Or you figured I'd be desperate enough to say yes." Jordan laughed, but lacked humor. "Come on, man. Don't be like that. I know things are tight, but you've always been good with money, and I wouldn't ask if I didn't believe in this." Michael leaned back in his chair. "Let me get this straight. You're asking a guy who just lost his job, whose wife is halfway out the door, whose daughter is selling toys on the lawn, to front you $5,000 for a car you don't own, in a scheme you're not even sure works." Jordan's smile faltered. "You make it sound worse than it is." Michael said nothing. The silence stretched. Eventually, Jordan's tone changed. Defensive now. "You always do this. Act like you're better than everyone. You think because you had a desk job and a mortgage that you got life figured out? Newsflash, Mike, nobody's stable. Everyone's faking it. At least I'm honest about it." Michael didn't blink. "I think you came here hoping I was desperate enough to give you money I don't have. And when you realized I wasn't, you decided to insult me." Jordan stood up, pacing now. "You're unbelievable. You've been coasting for years. Always playing the good guy, the responsible one. But look at you now. No job, your wife's checked out, and you're still pretending like you're above me. I never said I was above you." Jordan pointed a finger. "You didn't have to." Michael stood slowly. "This conversation's over." Jordan scoffed. "Right. Of course it is. You'd rather sit here in your little pity palace than admit you need help too." "I don't need help," Michael said quietly. "Not from you. Not like this." Jordan grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. "You know what? Screw it. I'll find the money somewhere else. And when this deal goes through, don't bother showing up asking for a piece." Michael nodded once. "Understood." Jordan paused at the door. "Mom was right. You've always been too proud for your own good." Then he left. Michael stood there for a long moment, the echo of the slammed door still ringing in the air. He walked back to the table, picked up the untouched glass of water, and poured it into the sink. The next morning, there was no follow-up message from Jordan. No apology, no explanation, just silence, as if the confrontation had erased years of brotherhood in minutes. Michael wasn't surprised. Later that day, while driving Max to soccer practice, his phone buzzed with a message from his father. "Jordan says you're being difficult again. He's trying to build something. Maybe support him instead of tearing him down." Michael stared at the message, then tucked the phone away without responding. His father's loyalty to Jordan had always been unshakable, even when it defied logic. It wasn't worth arguing. At practice, Michael sat alone on the bleachers. He watched Max play, letting the noise of parents and shouting coaches drown out the thoughts in his head. His mind drifted, not to the money, not even to Jordan, but to the deeper reality unfolding before him. This experiment, this orchestrated illusion of hardship, wasn't just revealing who was unreliable. It was uncovering how fragile relationships became when no one thought they had anything to gain. Jordan's proposal hadn't been betrayal. It had been a revelation, a clear confirmation that even family, even blood, could twist opportunity from the ruins of someone else's misfortune. Michael stayed quiet the rest of the evening. He cooked dinner, helped Ellie with a school project, and listened to Amanda's brief call from her mother's house. She said she wouldn't be home until late Sunday. No further explanation. That night, he sat down at his desk, opened his journal, and added another entry. Jordan asked for money despite knowing I had none. Anger when refused. No offer of help. No concern for well-being. Left in anger. He stared at the words for a long time. Then, for the first time since the experiment began, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of what he was doing. Not guilt, not regret, just the gravity of the truth he was chasing. He closed the notebook and looked out the window. Somewhere out there, Jordan was spinning another plan. Maybe someone else would take the bait. Maybe they wouldn't. But Michael knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't be that person ever again. By the end of the fourth week, Michael's world had taken on the eerie quiet of something slowly imploding. Not with dramatic collapse, but with a persistent erosion, like water wearing down stone. Amanda remained mostly at her mother's, appearing only briefly and usually without warning. She would drift into the house, speak in clipped sentences, and vanish into the guest room with her phone. The children, especially Ellie, began asking fewer questions about her absence, as if their young minds had already made peace with the new normal. Michael kept his routine minimal, deliberate. He woke early to make breakfast for the kids, walked Ellie to school when the rain allowed, and returned to a house that felt both too empty and too heavy. The money remained untouched, locked away and multiplying under the management of a quiet, discreet financial advisor he had contacted anonymously. But none of that wealth could buy what he had set out to find. At least, not yet. He began documenting every interaction with precision. A separate notebook now sat on his desk, filled with handwritten entries. It had become more than a record. It was a map of truths, a ledger of humanity. He wrote down every comment, every facial expression, every silence that said more than words. And over time, the list of people who had stayed consistent grew shorter. One afternoon, he received an unexpected message from Ben, an old college friend he hadn't seen in years. They had once been close, roommates for a semester, part of the same late-night study group that had eventually turned into a long chain of job recommendations and mutual connections. The message was brief but genuine. "Hey, heard through a friend you're going through a rough patch. Let me know if you want to grab coffee or need help with anything. No pressure." Michael responded immediately. They met the next morning at a quiet cafe downtown. Ben looked older, more tired around the eyes, but his smile was the same, open, warm, unguarded. He wore a windbreaker and scuffed sneakers, and he didn't launch into any pitch or favor. He just sat down, ordered black coffee, and said, "So, how are you really doing?" Michael almost didn't know how to answer. He had gotten so used to spinning the narrative, so comfortable with the facade, that honesty felt foreign on his tongue. But something in Ben's tone, steady and uncomplicated, cut through the fog. "I'm figuring things out," Michael said. Ben nodded. "That's fair. I won't ask for details. Just wanted you to know I've got a few freelance projects. If you want in, you're welcome. No commitment. Just say the word." Michael looked at him, trying to detect any hint of performance, any subtle sign of leverage. There was none. "I appreciate that," he said. "No problem. You helped me out with my resume years ago. I haven't forgotten." They sat for another half hour, mostly talking about old professors, strange college memories, and how fast life had turned into something none of them had prepared for. When they parted, Ben clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Just don't let it crush you, whatever it is." Michael walked away with something he hadn't felt in weeks, a sense of grounding, the kind of internal steadiness that came not from validation, but from knowing someone had simply offered a hand without asking what was in it for them. That night, he entered Ben's name in the notebook. Beside it, he wrote just one word: unchanged. The contrast to everyone else grew sharper. Amanda's distance had turned into dismissal. Jordan had not spoken to him since the failed investment pitch. Lisa had unfollowed him on social media, and his mother now called Amanda directly to check on the kids, without even pretending to involve him. Even small interactions had changed. At the grocery store, a former neighbor who once invited them to barbecues nodded stiffly and walked past. Michael had become radioactive, not because of who he was, but because of what he was perceived to lack. To reinforce the illusion, Michael began cutting back visibly. He canceled streaming services, turned down the thermostat to save on utilities, and sold a few items online that hadn't been touched in years: an old camera, a treadmill Amanda had insisted they buy but never used, even a designer bag she had left behind. He didn't need the money, but he needed the performance to be airtight. The final push came when he skipped dinner one night, claiming he wasn't hungry. Ellie looked at him across the table, her brow furrowed. "You didn't eat lunch either," she said quietly. "I'm just not feeling great," he lied. She didn't argue, but the worry in her eyes stayed with him long after she went to bed. Later, he stood in the kitchen, staring at the near-empty fridge. He knew he could refill it 10 times over, could have fresh groceries delivered within the hour, but that wasn't the point. The experiment had to reach its conclusion, and they were close now, closer than ever to the final confrontation that would make or break the silence he'd carried for weeks. That Sunday, Amanda returned briefly, claiming she needed to grab a few things. She barely acknowledged Michael as she moved through the house. In the bedroom, she collected clothes, a second phone charger, and her makeup bag. Michael watched from the doorway. "You're not staying?" he asked. She didn't look at him. "I've got a meeting early tomorrow. I'll be back next weekend." He crossed his arms. "You know Ellie thinks you're leaving for good." Amanda stopped packing for a moment, then resumed. "Then maybe you should stop lying to her about what's really going on." Michael's jaw tightened. "I haven't lied." She zipped the bag with more force than necessary. "You've lied by omission. You act like you've got it handled, but you don't. And it's not just a job. It's you, Michael. You're just not the same." He stepped back, letting her pass. "Neither are you." She paused at the top of the stairs, then descended without another word. When the door closed, Michael exhaled slowly and returned to his journal. He opened a new page and wrote Amanda's name again. Beneath it, a line, detached completely, present in body only, prioritizes image over partnership. He closed the book. The tipping point had arrived, not with a bang, but with a series of small cracks that could no longer be ignored. The people who had once filled his life were retreating. The experiment had served its purpose. Now, it was time to gather what he had learned, prepare for the final act, and decide who deserved to be part of the truth. The countdown to the confrontation had begun, and this time, Michael would be the one asking the questions. It happened on a Wednesday. The air was tense from the moment Amanda walked through the door, her keys clattering too loudly in the bowl by the entryway. Michael, who had just finished helping Max with a spelling worksheet, sensed it instantly. Amanda's posture was too rigid, her movements too quick, and her eyes locked on everything but him. She wasn't back for a weekend visit. She had come for something else. Dinner was a quiet affair, but not peacefully so. Ellie tried to tell a story about a project she was doing at school, but Amanda barely nodded. Max stared at his plate. Michael chewed slowly, listening to the ticking of the clock on the wall and the undercurrent of something sharp that seemed to hang in the space between them. Then, without warning, Amanda stood up, pushing her plate away. "I can't do this anymore," she said. Michael looked up. "Do what?" "This," she said, gesturing vaguely. "Pretend that everything's going to magically get better while we sit here eating canned soup like we're one step away from food stamps." Ellie's fork froze midair. "Amanda," Michael said calmly, "can we talk in private?" "No," she snapped. "No more whispering behind closed doors. The kids deserve to know what's going on, too. They're not stupid." Max looked down at his plate. Ellie glanced nervously between them. Michael kept his voice steady. "This isn't the time or place." Amanda scoffed. "It's never the time. That's your problem, Michael. You act like waiting will fix everything. Like if we just breathe through the chaos, the world will rearrange itself to suit your narrative." "Please," he said again, glancing at the kids. But Amanda wasn't done. Her voice, though not raised to a shout, was cutting in its clarity. "I married a man who used to take responsibility, who used to lead, who used to try. I don't even recognize you anymore." Michael stood slowly. "We should finish this conversation away from the table." Amanda hesitated, then stormed toward the living room. Michael followed. The moment they were out of earshot, she turned on him again. "This is not a rough patch anymore. This is how you become passive, directionless, numb." He folded his arms. "I'm doing everything I can with the cards I've been dealt." "No," she shot back. "You're hiding behind excuses. You won't apply for jobs. You won't tell your family what's really going on. You sit around acting like a martyr, waiting for everyone else to pick up your slack." Michael stared at her. "You mean your mother and your sister, who are already looking for houses they think we can move into? Jordan, who tried to use me for cash? Or maybe Lisa, who's been sending me articles about bankruptcy laws?" Amanda blinked, thrown off for a moment. "I've watched all of you," Michael continued, voice low, "documented every conversation. And not one person, not you, not your family, ever asked me how I was doing. You all went straight to crisis mode, not to support, but to control, to dictate, to panic." Amanda shook her head. "You're twisting things." "No," he said. "I've been silent. I let everyone speak. Now it's my turn." She crossed her arms. "Say what you want, Michael, but I know what I see. A man who let everything fall apart and refuses to fix it." There it was, the truth, raw and unveiled. She wasn't just angry. She had given up. The woman who once supported him through late nights and long commutes, who once laughed at inside jokes and whispered dreams beneath bedsheets, had become a stranger. And he wasn't sure when the shift had begun, only that it was complete now. He looked past her, toward the hallway, where Ellie was peeking around the corner. Their eyes met. Her small, worried face was a reflection of everything he had tried to protect. He gave her a soft nod, then turned back to Amanda. "I think you should stay at your mother's full time," he said. Amanda narrowed her eyes. "Are you kicking me out?" "I'm suggesting space," he replied. "For all of us, including the kids. They need stability. And they can't have that with a storm walking to the door every weekend." She looked as though she might argue, but instead, she turned away and walked upstairs without another word. The rest of the night was a haze. Michael tucked Max and Ellie into bed, reassuring them with quiet smiles and promises that things would be okay. But once the house was silent again, he sat on the couch in the dark, the weight of everything pressing down on him. This wasn't just about money anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. It was about erosion of trust, of empathy, of partnership. Amanda's explosion hadn't surprised him. What surprised him was how little it hurt. It had all been bleeding out slowly, until there was almost nothing left to lose between them. The next morning, Amanda packed 2 suitcases without speaking. Michael helped Max put on his shoes, while Ellie watched her mother from the stairs, silent and tense. When Amanda finally walked the door, she said, "I'll call later." Michael nodded. "We'll be here." The door closed, and for the first time in weeks, the house felt still. Not just empty, but quiet in a different way. Peaceful. That evening, Ben texted again. "Checking in. You good?" Michael replied, "Rough day, but getting clearer." Ben sent back one sentence, "Call me when you're ready." Michael set the phone down and walked into the kitchen. Ellie's toy sale earnings still sat in a small jar on the counter, untouched. He picked it up, turned in his hands, and felt the pressure in his chest shift. The lie had done more than reveal others. It had revealed him, too, what he could endure, what he could no longer accept. And now, as everything teetered on the edge of unraveling, the clarity was undeniable. It was time to take the truth out of hiding. The attic had not been opened in years. It was a kind of space that collected not just dust but forgotten chapters, the overlooked relics of a life lived too fast to pause and remember. Michael stood at the top of the wooden ladder, flashlight in hand, the air stale and tinged with insulation fibers. He wasn't entirely sure what he was looking for, only that something in him had urged him to come up here after Amanda left for good. He began pulling open old boxes, their cardboard soft at the edges. Baby clothes from Max's first months, a bin filled with Ellie's preschool art projects, tax documents from years past, and then a box labeled with his name in Amanda's handwriting. That stopped him. He carried it carefully to a dusty armchair in the corner. Inside were photo albums, birthday cards, handwritten notes, and the kind of memorabilia that once held meaning and now carried quiet weight. A Polaroid of him and Amanda from college, arms wrapped around each other at a campus festival. Notes she had left in his lunch bag when he was working late shifts. One, written on a napkin, read, "You're doing better than you think. I love you." It was dated over a decade ago. He read the words several times, something tightening behind his ribs. That Amanda, the one who wrote that note, had felt like a partner, had believed in him without seeing him as a tool or provider. She had existed. But where had she gone? Further down the box, he found an envelope with a bundle of printed emails, correspondence from when they were long distance, before they'd moved in together. Reading them was like stepping into a version of himself he barely remembered. They talked about future plans, silly dreams, what kind of couch they'd buy, what dog they'd eventually get. The tone was playful, sometimes deeply emotional, filled with longing and optimism. And then he found something else, a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges, in his own handwriting, a list of goals. He read them aloud to the stillness. Start my own consulting firm. Be present for my kids. Pay off the house before 45. Take Amanda to Italy. Never lose myself in the job. He chuckled bitterly at that last one, but the irony wasn't lost on him. He had become so focused on playing a role, on maintaining the illusion of security and success, that he hadn't noticed how far he drifted from those very promises. The lie about the lottery hadn't just exposed others. It had cornered him into remembering the version of himself that once believed life could be full and honest. Back downstairs, he opened a second drawer of his desk and pulled out an old notebook Amanda had given him during their first year of marriage. Inside were scrawled entries about their early days. Moving into their first apartment, Ellie's birth, moments that felt overwhelming but meaningful. On one page, dated right after Max was born, he had written, "Amanda stayed up with Max all night. She's exhausted, but still made coffee for both of us. She's magic. I have no idea how I got this lucky." He hadn't written anything like that in years. Later that evening, while folding laundry, he found a small photo wedged between Ellie's shirts. It was from a family camping trip 4 summers ago. Amanda had taken the picture. Michael standing between Ellie and Max, each holding a fishing rod, all three squinting in the sun. He had been thinner then, laughing mid-sentence, Max's hand gripping the hem of his shirt. They looked happy. Not perfect, but present. He realized in what he had feared the most these past weeks. Not losing money or even losing Amanda, but losing the sense that any of it had been real. Had their marriage always been transactional? Had the kindness from his family always been performance? Or had time, fatigue, and quiet resentment slowly turned love into obligation? He called his mother that night. She answered on the second ring, her voice cautious. "Hi," Michael said. "Just wanted to check in." A pause. "That's unexpected." "I know." More silence. "How are the kids?" she asked. They're okay. Ellie's been amazing. Max is doing all right. I worry about them, she said, especially now. Michael hesitated. I know I've made some mistakes, and I know you and Dad think I should have done things differently, but I just needed to hear, was there ever a time you were proud of me? Her voice was quiet. Michael, of course we were proud. You always held things too close. We never knew how to help. You could have asked. We didn't think you wanted us to. He nodded, even though she couldn't see it. After the call, he sat on the floor of his office, surrounded by photos, notebooks, and mementos of a past he was only now willing to face with clear eyes. In the following days, Michael found himself seeking out quiet spaces more than ever. Long walks in the neighborhood park. Early mornings alone on the back porch with coffee. The solitude didn't feel like isolation anymore. It felt like preparation. Ellie continued being the heart of the house. Her presence a soft reminder that not all love is conditional. One night, she climbed into his bed after a nightmare, curling into him the way she had as a toddler. "Do you miss Mom?" she whispered. Michael wrapped an arm around her. "I miss who she used to be." "She used to be funny," Ellie said. "And she used to kiss your cheek when she thought no one was looking." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, she did." They lay there in silence, the kind that didn't need fixing. When Ellie had fallen asleep, Michael stared at the ceiling and let the memories wash over him. Not to wallow, but to make peace with the fact that some parts of the past were gone. Not stolen, not ruined, just over. In the morning, he emailed Ben and accepted the freelance offer. It wasn't about the money. It was about movement, rebuilding not from urgency, but from clarity. He didn't need a job to prove worth. He needed something that reminded him of who he still was. And as he looked around at the life that was still here, Ellie's drawings on the fridge, Max's backpack near the door, the echo of laughter that still lingered in the walls, Michael understood that the real test had never been about the reactions of others. It had always been about what remained once the illusion faded. And what remained now was truth, raw and unflinching. The moment had been approaching like a train in the distance. Slow at first, almost abstract, then louder, heavier, undeniable. Michael could feel it building inside him, the weight of silence, of watching everyone else speak while he recorded their truths without ever offering his own, had finally reached its limit. He no longer felt the urge to protect their egos or shield them from his reality. The time for observation was over. He sent out the invitations on a Monday morning. A single group message, something he rarely used. The recipients, Amanda, Jordan, his parents, Lisa, and Helen. The message was short. Family meeting. This Saturday at 5 p.m. My house. Mandatory. Amanda replied first. "What is this about?" Michael responded with 3 words. "You'll find out." Jordan texted back with a sarcastic. "This going to be some kind of intervention?" Michael didn't reply. Lisa reacted with a thumbs up. His parents said nothing, but he knew they'd show up. They always did when control was on the table. Helen's response was curt. "Amanda needs notice if this is going to be a serious discussion." Michael replied, "It is." The rest of the week passed with an odd stillness. Amanda didn't come by to drop off clothes or check on the kids. Jordan didn't follow up. His parents didn't call. The silence was strategic. They were preparing their roles, imagining what kind of performance would be expected of them. Michael had no intention of making it easy. Saturday arrived. He cleaned the house but didn't overdo it. No scented candles, no homemade snacks, just a carafe of water on the coffee table, and a stack of chairs brought in from the dining room. Ellie and Max were spending the evening at a neighbor's house. He wanted the space clear, the conversation uninterrupted. At 4:55, Amanda arrived. She looked guarded but composed, wearing the same office blazer she used to wear when they still share a bedroom. She sat on the edge of the couch, arms folded. Jordan came in loud at 5:05, his usual smirk in place. Lisa followed, barely glancing at Michael. His parents came next, his mother with her purse clutched like armor, his father silent behind her. Helen arrived last, sweeping in with the air of someone already inconvenienced. No one asked why they were there. No one asked how Michael had been. He waited until they were all seated before taking his place at the center of the room. He stood, calm and composed, a notebook in one hand, the same notebook he had been writing in for weeks. He placed it on the coffee table and looked around the room. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I know this isn't how we usually do things, but tonight I'm going to say a few things. Then I'm going to read a few things. You can listen or not. That's up to you. But when I'm done, I'm not taking questions. I'm not explaining. I'm just done." A few eyebrows raised, but no one interrupted. Michael took a breath. "A little over 2 months ago, I told you all I had lost my job. I let you believe things were falling apart. I never asked for money. I never asked for help. I just told the truth, or what you believe was the truth, and waited." Amanda shifted. Helen leaned forward, suspicious. Jordan rolled his eyes. "I told you I lost my income, and in return, I learned who saw me as more than a paycheck." He opened the notebook. "In week 1, he said, flipping to a page, "Amanda told her mother I was checked out. Jordan asked me for $5,000 for a car flip. Lisa suggested I sell my car. Helen said Amanda should start looking at other options in case things didn't recover." Helen scoffed. "This is ridiculous." Michael ignored her. "In week 2, my own father said nothing, and my mother suggested I should have worked harder to avoid layoffs. In week 3, Amanda started sleeping away from home and changed her phone password." Amanda stood up. "That's not fair." Michael held up a hand. "You'll have time to speak, but not now." He turned the page. "In week 4, Ellie sold her toys on the sidewalk to help pay bills. No one, not one of you, offered her comfort. She made $37, and she gave it to me with more sincerity than any of you have shown in this room." The silence that followed was suffocating. Michael looked up. "I didn't lose my job." Lisa blinked. "What?" "I didn't lose my job," he repeated. "I quit after I won the lottery. $18 million. The words landed like a thunderclap. Amanda's mouth dropped open. Helen clutched her purse tighter. Jordan actually laughed out loud. "You're kidding." Michael's voice didn't waver. "I'm not." "You mean to tell us," Amanda said slowly, "that all of this, every fight, every tear, every sleepless night, was a test?" "No," he said. "It was a mirror. I wanted to see who would stand beside me if I had nothing, not who would grovel if I had everything." His mother spoke next. "This is cruel, manipulative." "It's honest," Michael replied. "Something this family hasn't been in a long time." Jordan stood up, still laughing. "So what now? You gonna rub it in our faces? Toss us a few bills like we're beggars?" Michael picked up the notebook. "No, I'm gonna give you all what you gave me. Distance. This," he held up the book, "isn't punishment. It's a record. And now that I know where everyone stands, I can move forward without the weight of pretending." Lisa stood, clearly angry. "You don't get to play God, Michael." "I didn't play God," he said. "I just stopped playing poor." Amanda's voice cracked. "You let me think we were losing everything. And when you thought that," he said softly, "you started preparing to leave." She looked away. Michael nodded once. Meetings over. No one moved at first. Then one by one, they began to rise. No apologies. No excuses. Just quiet exits, marked by slammed doors and bitter glances. When the last car pulled away, Michael sat back on the couch and looked around the silent room. The notebook still rested on the table. The truth was out, and though the air was heavy, he felt lighter than he had in years. Not because he had finally spoken, but because he no longer needed to be silent. The house was unusually quiet the morning after the confrontation. Michael moved through it like someone who just finished cleaning up after a long, exhausting party. No music, no laughter, only the echoes of words that couldn't be taken back. The truth was now out in the open, and yet there was no relief. Only a strange, disorienting calm. He didn't hear from anyone that morning. No calls, no texts. Even Amanda stayed silent. Michael didn't expect a sudden flood of remorse or reconciliation, but the emptiness of the aftermath settled into his chest like fog. He spent the day reading on the porch while Max and Ellie played in the backyard, the hum of their laughter reminding him that not everything in his life had fractured. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the first message arrived. It was from Jordan. "You should have told me. I would have handled it differently." Michael stared at the message for a while, not bothering to respond. A few minutes later, a second one followed. "I mean, come on, 18 million? We could have done something amazing with that." There was again the entitlement, the assumption that Michael's fortune belonged to all of them. Not once had Jordan asked why Michael had felt the need to test him in the first place. Not once had he acknowledged his own behavior. Michael muted the conversation and placed his phone face down on the table. Later that evening, Amanda showed up unannounced. She didn't knock. She still had her key and entered like someone trying to appear confident but unsure of her welcome. Michael met her in the foyer. She was dressed casually, her face tired, makeup-free. "Can we talk?" she asked. He gestured toward the living room. They sat across from each other, the coffee table between them like a border neither dared to cross. "I don't know what to say," Amanda started. "Yesterday was shocking." Michael nodded. That was the point. "Why?" she asked. "Why go through all of this instead of just telling me?" "Because I didn't know if you loved me," he said. "Not really. I wanted to see who you were. Without the money, without security, without guarantees." She flinched slightly. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" he asked. "You walked away. Amanda, the moment things got hard, before even asking if I was okay, you were halfway out the door." "I was scared," she said. "Everything changed so fast. You shut down. You weren't trying." "I was watching," he replied, "waiting to see if anyone would treat me the same without a paycheck in my hand." Amanda was quiet for a long time. Then, softly, "I didn't think you'd ever do something like that." "Neither did I," Michael admitted, "but it showed me what I needed to know." She looked up, eyes glistening. "And now what? You hate me?" "I don't hate you," he said, "but I don't trust you anymore, and that's worse." She covered her mouth with her hand, and for the first time in weeks, she looked genuinely broken. Not defensive, not angry, just tired and lost. "I didn't marry you for money," she whispered. "No," he agreed. "You married me for the life you thought I could give you, but when that life disappeared, even temporarily, you disappeared with it." Amanda stood up slowly. "I should go." Michael didn't stop her. As she walked to the door, she paused. "Do the kids know?" "Not yet," he said. "I'll tell them when the time is right." She nodded and left. That night, after the children were in bed, Michael sat on the porch with his notebook again. He opened it, flipped to Amanda's name, and added one final line. Understood the truth, but only after it no longer mattered. At exactly 10:15, his phone buzzed with a new message. "Ben," it read, "still proud of you. Nothing changed on my end." Michael smiled, small, real. That one message was worth more than any apology that might come from the others. Ben hadn't asked for money, hadn't treated him differently, hadn't turned cold when the mask came off. That was the definition of loyalty. The next morning, Ellie woke early. She wandered into the kitchen in her pajamas and asked, "Is Mom coming back today?" Michael knelt down beside her. "Not today, sweetie." She nodded. She looked really sad when she left. "She's thinking about some things," he said. "But you and Max are safe. That's what matters most." Ellie hugged him tightly. "Did she find out about your money?" Michael paused, surprised. "How do you know about that?" She shrugged. "I heard you talking last night." He smiled gently. "I was going to tell you. You just beat me to it." Ellie stepped back. "So we're rich now?" Michael thought about it. "We're comfortable. But that doesn't mean we forget who we are." "Good," she said. "I still want to sell my toys. Just for fun." He laughed softly. "You're amazing, you know that?" She beamed. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." They had cereal together at the kitchen table, the sunlight slowly creeping across the floor, filling the room with a quiet kind of peace. For the first time in months, Michael felt like something was beginning, not ending. The fallout would continue. There would be more awkward conversations, more uncomfortable silences, and more people trying to rewrite their parts in the story now that the ending had changed. But Michael had made peace with it. The truth had been revealed. The lies were done. And now, whatever came next would be built not on illusion, but on something real. The silence in the days following the reveal was more telling than any words that could have been spoken. Michael had anticipated denial, defense, and perhaps even confrontation. But instead, there was only avoidance. One by one, those who had once filled his inbox and called regularly now drifted away, each of them trying to recalibrate their behavior under the weight of what they had shown him, and more importantly, what he had recorded. He spent most of those days at home, working quietly on the freelance contracts Ben had passed along. It wasn't about needing the income. It was about rebuilding structure, reclaiming a sense of purpose without pretending to chase security. Michael worked with focus and clarity, but his eyes drifted off into the notebook, sitting closed on the corner of his desk. It was finished now, not in pages, but in purpose. On Thursday, Amanda showed up again. She hadn't texted or called ahead. She stood at the door for a full minute before ringing the bell, as if she were deciding between entering and turning back. Michael opened the door and simply waited. "I brought Ellie's sketch pad," she said. "She left it at my mom's." He nodded and stepped aside. She entered the house slowly, her movements careful, like someone stepping into a place that no longer felt familiar. She handed him the pad, but didn't make a move to leave. "Can we talk?" she asked after a moment. Michael led her to the living room. They sat apart, not just physically, but emotionally, the space between them now filled with the weight of everything that had gone unsaid for years. Amanda spoke first. "I've been thinking about everything, about what you did, and I realize I probably would have failed your test even if I'd known." Michael didn't answer right away. He waited. "I think I let the fear take over," she continued, "of losing comfort, of not knowing what came next. And I didn't know how to handle it without resenting you." He nodded slightly. "You weren't alone. Most of the people I thought I could count on turned away." Amanda looked down at her hands. "It wasn't just the money, though. I think maybe we were already drifting, and the illusion of security was the last thing tying us together." He didn't argue. She wasn't wrong. She met his eyes. "I'm sorry for all of it, for not standing by you, for not asking you how you felt. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say it." Michael inhaled deeply. "Thank you. That means something. Truly." She rose, her movement slow and solemn. "I'll be around. For the kids. Just let me know what you need." "I will." After she left, Michael sat in the silence, letting the apology settle in. It hadn't changed the outcome, but it had brought clarity. Amanda's love hadn't been malicious. It had just been conditional. And that kind of love, no matter how well-intentioned, was no longer enough. The next day, Michael met Ben for lunch. They sat outside at a cafe near the waterfront, the late summer breeze cutting through the heat. Ben greeted him with the same easy smile he always had, the kind that didn't ask questions or require reassurances. "So, how does it feel to be a free man?" Ben asked after the server left. Michael sipped his coffee. "Liberating. Lonely. Necessary." Ben nodded. Truth has a way of clearing out the noise. They talked for an hour. About work, Ellie's toy sale, the confrontation, and the strange quiet that followed. Ben listened without judgment, offering only honest reactions, not solutions. "You know," he said toward the end, "most people wouldn't have done what you did." "I know," Michael said, "but I had to know." Ben tilted his head. "And now that you do, I can move forward," Michael said, "not just away from them, but towards something better." When he returned home, Ellie was sitting at the kitchen table, drawing with her newly returned sketch pad. She looked up and smiled. "Ben's nice," she said. "He always talks to you like you're not broken." Michael chuckled. "That's because he sees people for who they are, not what they can give him." She went back to her drawing. "I like people like that." That evening, Michael received a series of messages. "Lisa, I don't think it's fair you judge us during a lie. People react to stress. You set us up to fail. Jordan, still think you're dramatic, but whatever. Guess I misjudged the situation. Helen, I hope, for the kids' sake, you reconsider your behavior. Families support each other, not test each other. Michael didn't reply to any of them. Instead, he opened the notebook one final time and wrote one word on the last page. Enough. Then he closed it and placed it on the shelf. The truth had been spoken. The reactions had been logged. And those who had chosen distance in the face of struggle had revealed exactly who they were. Not enemies, not villains, just people flawed, frightened, and not fit to walk with him any further. The house felt lighter that night, not because the furniture had changed or the rooms were cleaner, but because the weight of pretending was gone. The act was over. The audience had left. Only the truth remained. The day Michael signed the separation papers was sunny, quiet, and nothing like he'd expected. There was no dramatic scene, no shouting or accusations. Amanda met him at the lawyer's office dressed in calm professionalism. She reviewed the documents with cool detachment, initialed where needed, signed at the bottom, and slid the papers across the table. Their marriage, 14 years of partnership, 2 children, a dozen holidays, 100 shared routines, was now a legally concluded chapter. They walked out of the building in silence, standing for a moment on the steps, unsure if they were meant to say goodbye. "Let me know if the kids need anything," Amanda finally said, her voice soft, almost unsure. "I will," Michael replied. And that was it. She walked toward her car, and Michael didn't watch her drive away. He didn't need to. His eyes were already fixed on the horizon. Over the following weeks, the pieces of his new life began to take shape. He found a house on the quieter edge of the Olympic Peninsula, a 2-story craftsman nestled among evergreens, modest but full of light. The backyard was wild and green, with space for Ellie and Max to play, and enough distance from his old life to allow room for something new. Moving day arrived without much ceremony. Ben helped load boxes into moving van, while Ellie and Max ran through the empty rooms, their voices echoing off the bare walls. Amanda came by only briefly, offering logistical help, her tone neutral and clipped. Michael let it pass. There was no use trying to fix what had never really healed. The new house, once unpacked, quickly began to feel like home. Michael let the furniture be simple, the walls mostly bare. The silence of the space was not lonely, it was honest. Every corner of it was his, and every decision now came with clarity. The wealth he'd once hidden was no longer a burden, but a tool. Quiet, discreet, and never flaunted. He used a portion of his winnings to set up a small foundation, one bearing Ellie's name. It wasn't about branding or prestige. The foundation supported families in financial crisis, especially those blindsided by job loss or illness. He hired a director to run it full-time, remain anonymous in the public filings, and required only one thing from the team: treat every applicant like a person, not a number. Ellie was the first to ask what the foundation did. "It helps people," Michael told her one night while they cooked dinner together. "People who've been knocked down but don't have anyone to lean on." She looked up at him, eyes bright. "Like how no one helped you when they thought we were poor?" He smiled gently. "Exactly. And now you helped them anyway. Because that's how it should be." Max adjusted well to the new house. He missed his old friends, but the freedom of the backyard and a bigger bedroom made the change easier. Michael enrolled both children in the local school, opting for public education not out of frugality, but to keep their lives grounded. He wanted them surrounded by the real world, not insulated by privilege. Amanda took the news with a raised eyebrow, but said nothing. Her visits remained polite and scheduled. She never asked how Michael had spent the money. Perhaps part of her didn't want to know. One evening, as the sun set behind the tall trees surrounding the house, Michael sat on the back porch, a mug of tea in hand, and watched Ellie sketching quietly at the patio table. The wind stirred her hair, and she brushed it aside without pause, completely absorbed in her work. Ben joined him a few minutes later, sitting down with a beer in hand. "This place suits you," Ben said. "I think so, too," Michael replied. "You've come a long way." Michael looked out at the trees. "And I've still got a long way to go." But now I know which direction. Ben tapped his bottle against Michael's mug. To new starts. They sat in companionable silence, the sound of the woods all around them. No judgment, no expectation, just peace. Months passed, seasons changed, and with them, so did Michael. He restructured his days with intention. Mornings were for the kids, breakfast, school drop-offs, quiet chats. Afternoons were work, consulting, volunteering, checking in with the foundation. Evenings were slow and unhurried. He cooked. He read. Sometimes, he simply sat on the porch and listened to the wind. He no longer needed to prove anything. When people asked about his story, new neighbors, casual acquaintances, he kept it simple. I had a big change in life. I learned a lot. Now I'm just trying to live it better. He never mentioned the lottery. Not because he feared being used, but because it didn't define him. What had changed his life wasn't the money. It was a clarity that came when everything else had been stripped away. Ellie grew more confident. Her artwork flourished. Max became bolder, more curious. They laughed more now, long, loud, unfiltered laughs that filled the house with warmth. One afternoon, Ellie brought him a new drawing. "It's you," she said, handing it over. Before and after, the sketch was simple. Two versions of her father. On the left, a tired man with slumped shoulders. On the right, a smiling man, standing in a forest surrounded by stars. "Which one do you like more?" she asked. Michael traced the lines with his eyes. "This one," he said, pointing to the second figure, "because he has stars." "No," Michael said, pulling her into a hug, because he finally looked up to see them. He kept the drawing on his nightstand after that, a reminder that no matter how heavy the past had been, it no longer had the power to shape what came next. Trust, he learned, was more valuable than money. And sometimes to rebuild your life, you had to first lose the illusion of what you thought it was. And so he had begun again.